Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 339. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are here this week to review and discuss the live-action remake of Snow White.
Here we go.
This has been something that we have been talking about for quite some time, not just as a Disney community, but specifically you and I have been talking about it on the show for so long because it was a highly anticipated film for a number of reasons. I think a lot of people were excited at the idea of seeing a live-action Snow White brought to film. I think a lot of people were excited to see, initially, the whimsy and what you could do with these characters that are so beloved, and then the well-documented controversies that followed, and of course its performance at the box office too. All of this has led up to a very highly anticipated conversation for you and I think certainly, for a number of reasons, a highly anticipated viewing of this film.
Yeah, I've been really looking forward to talking about this. And, not in the sense of, okay, let her loose, she's going to trash it. I mean, we're going to be fair. That's the whole premise of Snow White, right? She's fair. So we're going to be fair to this. But no, in all seriousness, I've been looking forward to discussing this because I went back and I listened to our review of the animated Snow White, which is back on episode 6. I mean, you're talking within the first few episodes of Monoreel Radio. We were still so green, and we still had so much to learn about Disney history. But, we were critical of even the animated film, even though it's the first one, even though that was Walt's baby. But even we sort of came to the conclusion that there were a lot of things that felt very dated. And even though we had watched it as children, we'd forgotten how dark it was. And that was kind of a surprise when we watched it again as adults. And we felt overall it was a pretty dark film, but it's really the dwarfs that bring the light and the levity. And me especially, I was very critical of Snow White as a character. I had even dubbed her a term that we had coined very early on in Monoreel Radio as a quote unquote flowery princess, because there wasn't much more depth to the character other than she was waiting to find her prince. So I guess you could say I got what I asked for.
Well, I think that is going to be a very interesting part of the conversation coming from your perspective, because my view on it was, yes, she was a flowery princess, especially on the heels of talking about someone like Ariel, because Little Mermaid was the first episode we ever did.
And that's what we were raised on.
Right. And still raised on Snow White. But a lot of what they did, you forgave for, number one, it is a masterpiece. It is the first one of its kind. He was the first, Walt Disney was the first person that tried to do something like this because it was made in 1937. I mean, very clearly, the character of Snow White, while not the strongest Disney princess by any stretch of the imagination, is still a timeless character because not only did they think enough of her to try and bring the franchise to life in live action, which is partly because she's timeless and partly because they're running out of ideas, she's also so beloved in the parks. It's a character that people still love to see. So, with all of that being said, did you get what you wanted? Was this worth the wait? And is this, in fact, as problematic as the controversies sort of led us to believe that it would be? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crew neck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all of the collections.
Following the death of her parents, Snow White lives with her evil and vain stepmother who keeps her from seeing the public while stealing from said public. One day, a thief named Jonathan breaks into the castle to steal food and meets Snow White, whom he believes is a servant, and explains that the public is starving and that the princess should come out of hiding to help. He is caught and tied to the palace gate to freeze, however Snow White sets him free. The queen, infuriated, asks her magic mirror who is the fairest of them all, and the mirror tells her that it is in fact Snow White. The queen sends Snow White to pick apples where the huntsman is to kill her, however he tells Snow White that the queen is evil and lied to her about her dead father, so she flees into the woods. She encounters kind animals and finds a cottage that she falls asleep in. It is home to the 7 dwarves who return home to find her. She decides to stay the night while the queen learns that the huntsman did not, in fact, kill Snow White as ordered, and he is then sent to the dungeon. The next day, Snow White bonds with Dopey after she teaches him to whistle. Convinced that her father is still alive, she leaves the dwarves and goes to find her father. She encounters the palace thief Jonathan, who along with other bandits steal in the king's name. Palace guards arrive to fight the bandits, however Snow White, with the help of woodland creatures, distracts them, and they escape before reuniting with the 7 dwarves after Jonathan is struck with an arrow protecting Snow White, which Doc helps mend. Things between Jonathan and Snow White become romantically complicated and confusing as the palace guards start to close in on them. In an effort to protect the dwarves' home, the bandits leave and promise to meet Snow White in 2 days to go to the southern kingdom to find the king. Snow White gives Jonathan her necklace before he is captured and taken to the queen. The queen takes the necklace and banishes Jonathan to the dungeon before summoning magic to make a potion, turning her into an old hag. She dips an apple into poison, which will put Snow White to sleep only to be awakened by true love's kiss. The hag finds Snow White at the cottage, who tells Snow White that Jonathan was captured, and she gives her the necklace as proof. Seeing that Snow White loves him, she then gives her the apple to help sustain her on her journey. Snow White bites the apple and begins to fall under the spell as the queen exposes that she had the king killed just before Snow White dies herself. Jonathan and the huntsman, inspired by Snow White's bravery and goodness, help each other escape from the dungeon. Jonathan then arrives to see that Snow White has died, and he kisses her, breaking the curse and awakening her. She kisses him back and tells him that the queen murdered the king and that they must return to restore the kingdom. Dopey speaks and tells her that they are not afraid of the queen anymore, and they all leave together. Snow White confronts the queen in front of the entire kingdom, and the queen challenges Snow White to kill her. When she won't, the queen orders the guards to publicly kill Snow White. Snow White remembers the guards for who they really are, and they turn on the queen. Furious, the queen destroys her mirror and is turned to dust before being pulled into the mirror, which then reassembles itself. The kingdom reunites as Snow White has now taken her rightful throne as the queen.
So right off the rip, I think it is worth noting that when we do these live action remakes, we don't typically rehash the plot because it's a given that we've already reviewed its animated predecessor. But in this case, knowing what we knew going in and that there were going to be story changes, we decided to treat this as its own entity and give the new plot. We're also assuming that a lot of people have not watched this film.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you come out of the womb knowing the story of Snow White. You don't need to read the book. You don't need to see the movie. You just know what it is.
Speaking of books, the one thing that was consistent about this film is that they did do the tried and true open of the storybook set on the beautiful blue velvet. Which was a staple of not just the animated film Snow White, but so many of Walt Disney's early films. They even spoofed it in Enchanted.
Very well, by the way.
Yes. So I like that they gave us something familiar here, but within, 3 seconds of screen time, they immediately ruin it with this horrible, horrible CGI. They have like a hedgehog that rolls across the book. And without knowing that the CGI animals were intentionally designed to look cartoonish unlike what they did with Lion King's live action remake, where they were supposed to be photo real, it just looks bad. So it's very jarring, and it's also very hard to turn your brain off into not believing that this film is going to be exactly what you expected it to be within 3 seconds. I also feel like they were trying to hit us with more familiarity in the voiceover, because to me this sounds like Olaf. And they also, one of the story changes was how Snow White got her name. It was that she was born on a very stormy, snowy night, and the family had to, pardon the pun, weather the storm for her arrival, and that's how her name came to be. But we get a big snowflake, and I really think the directive from Disney, meaning as a studio, it was, this is what we like, right? Frozen, this works. This is what you guys like. You see something familiar here? This is good, right? It felt like they were begging us to buy in here.
Yeah, they never questioned for a second, though, why the king and queen who live in a palace, as they prepare for the birth of their daughter, are now in a carriage going through a snowstorm as opposed to just being in the palace. We're gonna gloss over the fact that was a choice that they made.
Right, because we're in the time of midwives.
Yeah.
Like, where were you going? A hospital? No.
So I don't know where they were going, but they had, Anyway, it is impossible. If you can, you're better than me. I think it is sometimes impossible to block out the white noise that was the aforementioned controversies getting into the open of the film. And by the open of film, I mean just the film opening in theaters, and then inevitably dropping on Disney+. So when you sit to watch it and you try to go in with an open mind, and the first thing you see is that aforementioned CGI you just talked about, I'm not going to lie, I get the pit in my stomach when I got, oh my God, it's as bad as they said it is. It's as bad as we know it's going to be. To do the animals without knowing that was the choice that they made, it's jarring. When you do live action remakes, you're doing live action remakes. I understand that there's a lot of whimsy in this, specifically in the woods, but you expect to see photoreal adaptations of what these animals are. To the point where, honestly, like, to me, it almost felt like Enchanted. It's like, so are we spoofing this? Is this supposed to be corny and cheesy and hokey? And I just didn't know what it was. I think changing, in spite of the fact that it made no sense that they were in this carriage, finding a means of changing her name and therefore changing the source material, I mean, whatever, it worked. It was fine.
I agree. That was actually, I think, a good change and a good pivot.
I think, to your point, perhaps like a midwife should have been stuck, and maybe her mother is now in peril because she doesn't have somebody else there with her, because, to your point, there are no hospitals, there are no nurses. Like, maybe that was a part of the struggle and that was a part of the adversity. But believe me, there's a lot of things that we would have changed in this film. I think the other thing that works really well is that a term that we had used early on in Monoreel, and we still sort of use it today, though less so, is pantsuit princess.
Oh no, we got to bring that back full force.
And the way that our leading lady talked about this film in the media and in any interview or any forum in which she had a place to speak, you were led to believe that that's what this was going to be. I was so pleasantly surprised to see that, yes, there is the element where her parents and her father are preparing her to lead and explaining what good leadership is. However, they're still allowing her to be a child. There's still magic, there's music, there's whimsy, there's kindness, there's good. Leading is all of that, and I was just happy to see that it wasn't going to be a typical Disney reactionary thing where it's, okay, but we got to make her a strong leader, guys, and she's going to be a warrior. and that's not what she is. And I was very, very pleased to see that that's not the route that they took. They found ways to make this contemporary while also taking the things that are charming about the original film and melding it into one character.
I agree. It's actually a really good setup. You know, I think what you're expecting from all of the media hoopla was that you're going to see a child learning how to sword fight.
Yes.
And that's how she's going to become a leader. And it's not that at all. It actually is a really good setup. The only thing that I sort of go back and forth on a little bit is slamming into this opening musical number. And we are going to talk about the music, of course, as its own separate entity later on. But I think it is worth bringing up because they do have this opening number with the kingdom, who is sort of a character in itself. You know, it's like one character's POV that is representing all of the townspeople here. So I think you do need this sort of Beauty and the Beast-esque opening to establish the town as a character, as well as your setting, as well as your story. But the voiceover is still being peppered throughout that. And I feel like you're losing a little bit of an opportunity to really see her bond with her parents, especially when you factor in that in the animation, the mother is non-existent. We never see her. And they actually never address what happens to her father. We know that he obviously remarried, but we don't know if he's alive somewhere or I mean, it's strongly implied that he passed away, but they never actually spell that out in the animation. So being that you have both of them present here, it just would have been nice to see that relationship breathe a little bit. And maybe there's a lesson learned somewhere in there. I'm thinking in particular about the live action Cinderella. We know she loses the mother, but we really, once Lady Tremaine is in the picture, see how cruel she was being to Cinderella behind the scenes while her father is still present. So when her father is out of the picture, you really feel for Cinderella. And that's the sort of sympathy that I'm missing here, because the parents are essentially taken out in voiceover and we don't really get to feel the loss as much.
Here's the thing. I don't think we needed to spend too much more time with the parents. I think that killing them off in voiceover worked just fine. I don't think this movie needed to be any longer than it was. And then I think you run the risk of people just comparing it way too much to Cinderella, specifically because Snow White, very much the way that they're very heavy-handed in telling you she's a servant, she wears rags, she can't go out and be the princess anymore because of the evil stepmother, the queen. She almost feels like Cinderella. Like, it feels, I'm not going to say a ripoff, but it feels like it's just the same character rehashed.
I agree, but that does come right out of the source material. Although in the animation, they do in the voiceover establish that the queen forces her to dress in rags. But here, they really wrote themselves into a corner, because what's different in the animation is that we see her cleaning. By the way, all sorts of cleaning. She's mopping, she's doing laundry. You actually see her interact with different things in the palace. Here, it's brooms and mops, which she's also doing in front of the public that she's supposed to be concealed from. But I digress. The issue comes from, we see this play out as the prince is outside of the palace walls and hears her singing, and then goes in, declares, "You're the love of my life, come away with me." And here we see her cleaning through her "I Want" song. So it drags it out a little bit more. And this is where I feel like they really wrote themselves into a corner with it, because you've eliminated the prince. And instead of a prince, we get Jonathan, who magically breaks into the palace, which you would assume is heavily guarded because the queen has turned all of the farmers into guards.
I don't understand how he gets in. It defies logic that a thief can just enter a palace. It's not even the worst thing that they do here, though, because You have the narrator tell us that Snow White has started to forget who she is, which makes no sense in and of itself, because it's not like she's 3 years old when she loses her parents and she's too young to remember. She's old enough to remember. But you have a narrator telling us she's forgetting who she is while she's longing to be who she is. This is don't take a side, take my side all over again.
Your favorite line from Coco.
This is some of, just like in totality, if you're going to take weak writing and cram it into a 2-minute window, this is where it's really, really weak.
Well, this is also where they're handcuffed, right? Because she needs a motivation. So you have to have her hanging on to what her parents have instilled in her. But this is what I'm talking about, where it would have been nice to see it breathe earlier on, where maybe she's losing herself a little bit, but she's still hanging on to the memories of her parents.
I also think that it's kind of laughable when Jonathan is talking to her about how horrible things are, and she doesn't correct him when he assumes that she's a servant, and he's basically venting to her about herself. She doesn't correct him. All she says is, well, maybe the queen will listen. At what point has the queen done anything? You have been turned into a servant. You're the princess. At what point do you believe that she's going to listen to reason?
Well, this is where it really starts to collapse on itself, right? Because, again, she's cleaning outside at the gate where she can see the kingdom.
Right.
So she would know how bad things are getting
Yes.
out there. And also, what is he in there to steal? Yes, there's potatoes everywhere, but where are they coming from? Because if you turned all of the farmers into guards, which are doing a terrible job of securing your palace, there's nobody left to farm. So where are you getting all of this food that you're hoarding from your people? It just, the whole thing collapses. What I do think it does successfully, though, is give Snow White a little bit of agency, because she does stand up to the queen. And I want to talk about the queen because we are briefly hitting on her, but this is another thing that I actually think was really successful about the film, is how they were able to translate her wardrobe in the animation into a real world costume here. I completely bought it. I love how, they still kept the traditional cowl that she was wearing, but they used more contemporary fabrics that still worked for a period piece in Germany. But they blended it so seamlessly because, it looks very regal. She's got those high collars. It works with the jewels that she's stealing from the mines. She's got the crown. I really didn't think it was going to translate, but it's one of the things that they actually knocked out of the park in this film. And that's something that I did not think I was going to say at all. But back to Snow White standing up to her. I like that we really see the queen's MO, and that she's not only trying to establish herself as the most beautiful woman in the land, because, we did say that when we talked about the animation as well. She's one of the most evil villains Disney has ever written, because she just wants to be the prettiest girl in the room. But they doubled down on that here by also making her very much power hungry. So where everything does collapse with Jonathan coming into the palace, it works for her, because she doesn't care what she's doing to the people as long as she is sitting pretty. And there's this really good moment, and it's actually an instance of good writing in this film, when Snow White does try to stand up to her. She conjures a rose, and then she pulls out a diamond. A metaphor for two things that are beautiful, but one is weak and one is strong. And obviously that is supposed to mirror Snow White and herself and how they lead.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best written line in the film, where she makes the rose wilt away and she goes, "This is temporary, this is everlasting." our people don't want a flower, they want a diamond. I thought that it was coming off of some of the weakest writing in the film to then put this in, like, you can see where, specifically with the Queen, they are sort of plussing her as an overall character.
Absolutely. And then, we really see it play out when Snow White tries to help Jonathan and it backfires. After she's asked the Queen to help her people and is denied, she asks her to show Jonathan mercy because she's just going to have him killed. So instead of doing it outright, the Queen tells the guards to tie him up in front of the palace and just basically let him perish because he's going to freeze. Because I guess it's winter, but also we're getting scenes of Snow White in the garden.
Also,
which is in full bloom.
Apples, which you do in the fall.
Yep. Yeah. Not very consistent there.
Something that is consistent, though, is the CGI. And I know that we keep coming back to this, but it does bear repeating, specifically in the next scene. As you previously stated, we're in Germany. We are now being led out to the Enchanted Forest, where Snow White is to be killed by the huntsman. The problem is, instead of just shooting on location and finding a beautiful setting with sweeping vistas, I mean, we just talked about Zombies 4, how they made great use of the setting, right, in New Zealand. In this case, you rely on a CGI forest, and quite honestly, they make Germany look like The Lion King, which is set in Africa.
I hear you on that. I think a lot of that has to do with the CGI lighting, because I have a very specific note about that later where it really throws off the time of day. But to your point, this was shot at Pinewood in London. So that was complete CGI here. And for me, it sort of begs the question, was that intentional? I mean, yes, obviously CGI is intentional. You're going to do these VFX shots. But I mean in the sense of after the overwhelming amount of backlash when the photo of Snow White, quote unquote, leaked, which I said at the time, there is no such thing as a leak in Hollywood today. It's
right.
Either someone from the inside or it's organized by the PR team. I wonder if because that received so much backlash, they said, you know what, we're going to lock it down and just keep this in the studio. Because even with the reshoots, most of the things that were reshot were the CGI elements, but they didn't really cut back on budget, because where they do the practical set builds, and where we see the extras, they did spend the money there. So I really wonder if this has to do with more of the reception than anything else. And this was a pivot. But to your point, yeah, there's just so much of it that really doesn't look great. Particularly for me, it stands out in the forest when she's on the run and she's going through, the really dark parts of the forest. And that was a disappointment for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, they took such care in the animation by developing the multi-plane camera to give shots and scenes like this the depth to really make them pop. So it certainly does a disservice to the animated one. But what I also like about this in the animation is that it seems like Snow White is seeing things and her mind is playing tricks on her. They've completely eliminated that element by actually making things reach out and grab her and putting these faces on the trees. I wish they would have, embraced some horror elements here where her mind is playing tricks on her and it's all in her head. And then, she wakes up to daylight. And that goes back to what you were saying before. This is where it's really confusing. She wakes up in the morning. The cartoonish animals lead her to the cottage. And she goes to bed at what I believe is daybreak, because then we cut to the dwarfs singing Hi-Ho, which we will get into the music in a minute. But do you have anything before we get into our friends here?
No.
Okay. So one of the things that I was very surprised to learn with dwarfs, there is actually, if you're interested, some behind the scenes making of footage that's available. I was surprised to even find it. I thought Disney was going to keep it heavily under wraps, but it is out there. So what they did with the dwarfs, they did use motion capture for the actors. So similarly to the way that they did Mars Needs Moms, they did all of the face points so that you get the realistic, especially in close-up, you get the realistic face movements and facial expressions. However, the actors were not actually on set. They had puppeteers on set, much like they did Rocket for Guardians of the Galaxy, so that Rachel Zegler could get the sight lines correct at the height the dwarfs are going to be. But that was kind of a bummer to find out that, and really this is a direct result of Peter Dinklage's commentary, which came even before Rachel Zegler's, I think.
Yes.
Because when they announced that they were doing Snow White is when he said, you know, this really sets us back and sets back everything that I've tried to do with my platform. And, you know, he had the option to just not be a part of it, which he wasn't, and instead took away work and opportunities for leading roles for the community.
Right, and it's not just this, because there has now been backlash in regards to Wonka, because Wonka did the same thing.
Right.
Where they did... they didn't have little people playing Oompa Loompas, right? So Hugh Grant is playing an Oompa Loompa.
Right.
And so the trickle-down effect from this, it's so interesting all of these years later. You know, you're talking 4 or 5 years later, in some instances more than that, where, I mean, Disney, I think, is probably the most guilty of it, but other studios were sort of following Disney's lead, and instead of just taking a beat and thinking about what the adverse effects would be to give in to a silent mob, they were just so reactionary because they were so afraid of offending anybody that they made these knee-jerk reaction decisions and go, well, you can't say that we're thinking backwards, folks. Look. And they didn't realize that what they did in reality was worse than what they would have done the whole time. Because to your point, and to the point that, you know, and I respect Peter Dinklage. I think he's an incredible talent. And I've said that before. But I don't think that it's necessarily fair that he, at this point, has such an established career. He is very much a respected actor, and he deserves to be. And I understand that he wants to see growth and he doesn't want to just keep seeing typecast, but you're the shining example that you won't be typecast.
Yeah.
And you lost the opportunity in this film alone for 7 very talented actors that are in Hollywood right now that we are never going to see because of your commentary. And that's not even counting what happened with Wonka. So it is so interesting now, my point being all of these years, you know, sort of looking at it from the 30,000-foot view. And I think that if they knew then what they know now, I think the commentating public and I think those in the industry that made these decisions, I think that this would have all played out very differently.
No, and maybe it's not fair to speak to a community that we are not part of, but speaking more generally, when you reach the peak of your career or the peak of anything, when you're at the summit, turn around and help the people behind you.
Right.
To come up there with you. Don't stand up there and boast about it on your soapbox, you know? Because you not only cost actors the screen time and the face time on screen, but you cost them days of work. Because coming in to record voiceover and coming in to do motion capture is much quicker compared to doing a full set day where you could have been, especially in a musical.
Yeah.
Those numbers take days to shoot. So not only denied them an opportunity, you literally took money out of their pockets. And as a result, we get some pretty sloppy CGI. Circling back to your point about the lighting, I was very confused. I had to back it up so many times because, like I said, Snow White is asleep. She's sleeping through the day. And then we cut to the dwarfs in the mine. And because they changed up the music, they are starting their workday. But in the animation, we meet the dwarfs and they're singing Dig, Dig, Dig. They inserted that song into the middle of Hi Ho. So you really don't know. It's confusing what time of day it is because of the lighting when we first see them. Then they get to the mines and then they sing Hi Ho. It's home from work we go. So it's the end of the day and then they go meet Snow White. But it just feels very muddled because of all the lighting. We will, of course, like I said, break down the music later. But I do want to talk about the mine scene. I understand we're creating the CGI dwarfs, so the natural thing is to do a CGI set because this is where you're trying to save money because you didn't build it a practical mine.
Yeah.
But the way that they filmed this, and again, not using the voice actors that were cast, they're just using stand-ins and they're basically shooting it the way that they did Lion King, like black box theater style. Everything from the conveyor belts, like where Dopey's running, all of that is CGI'd. They didn't give them anything practical to work off of, and it shows. This is, for the first animated film, they made those diamonds sparkle. They figured out how to do it with the effect. So to cheap out and not actually, create a beautifully lit, sparkling set. This is the whole point of doing these live action films, is recreating these beloved scenes and bringing them into the real world. And this is where it really feels like that's not the purpose of the live action remakes, and you are just cashing in on a property that you already have and expecting people to come and see it at the box office. Because not only did you not put the effort forth to bring it to life, you also pandered to the ride that you created. Because the focus is really more than anything else on the mine cart and them riding it deep, deep into the mines, which that was never a part of the story. And the ride is awesome in the park. We love Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, even though I will go on a child's coaster and scream my head off in those swinging barrels. But they did such a great job with that. Let it be what it is in the parks. We don't need, I don't need the cross promotion here,
Right, but they look at it from the perspective of, well, now it's evergreen.
Right.
Not that it wasn't before, but this is by and large what they're doing with parks and attractions. Nothing is a new or original idea. I shouldn't say nothing, because we're getting a new character in the new Cars area at Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. But it's still something that's an IP. You're not going to get Pirates of the Caribbean or the Haunted Mansion as a concept for an attraction that then becomes a franchise. Those days are long gone. And I think that that's true of most parks at this point. But to comment on what you said, Who Framed Roger Rabbit did things 36 years ago at the time of this recording that you could have done with Snow White. And to your point, they chose not to save money. And there's reasons why something that came out this year looks awful, and something that is nearly 40 years old looks timeless and will continue to look timeless.
I was honestly so shocked to find out about the motion capture, because how do you have Marty Kleba looking like Tommy Lee Jones? Honestly, Tommy Lee Jones should sue for his likeness on Grumpy. That was the biggest surprise to me. I really thought that they just designed them in a computer, but to know that they were actually there doing the facial features, I don't know how we get Marty Kleba looking like TLJ.
So, we head home, and we meet Snow White, and Dopey gets locked in the room by himself because they all think that she's an ogre. And to his surprise, she wakes up and is not in fact an ogre. And this is where you start to bond Snow White with Dopey. I'm fine with this. I think that if you want one of them to have a character arc, Dopey really is the most beloved of all of them.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense that that's the character that they honed in on.
No, and I think that that was true of the animation as well, that there was always like a special bond between the two of them. Like they all loved her, but I think that there was just more of a gravitation between the two. Like I'm thinking particularly of, who was the one to stand on the shoulders and dance with her. That was Dopey. And I think that's where, because they cut it, and we're going to talk about that later, I think that's why they tried to give them a bond in a different way.
Right.
Speaking of changes, and this is going to get a little convoluted because there's a lot of musical numbers that are kind of jammed in back to back here. But I do want to talk about the setup of Whistle While You Work in particular, because this was a story change that I actually think worked as well. Because in the original, Snow White's mentality, and this is what we were talking about, the dated mentality. If I clean the house and keep house for them, maybe they'll let me stay. So she cleans with the animals. Obviously, they were not going to have the animals cleaning. And instead here, the modern take on it is that she teaches the dwarfs to clean. I'm all for teaching the men who live in this house to clean up after themselves. Well done here.
I think that that's fine. I think her bonding with Dopey and teaching him how to whistle was great. I wish that, frankly, and I'm kind of spoiling, my opinion of what we all knew was going to happen when Dopey eventually speaks. I would have been fine if they didn't make Dopey speak, and if that whistle at the end of the movie when he gets the attention of Snow White and the Evil Queen, if him just with that call would have been, if that's all he did other than whistle during Whistle While You Work, and now he's standing front and center with the rest of them, I think I would have found it more effective than him speaking and then inevitably becoming the narrator of the story.
I go back and forth with that because I feel like him not speaking because he's afraid, it does make for a good arc. But was it needed? Not necessarily. But I think because this film was already so riddled with controversy, if you just make him mute, does that open the door for, well, why didn't we have him learn sign language? And I feel like this was their way of playing it safe in this case. And honestly, I can't really blame them because they could not have another thing thrown at them.
Yeah, but you're not going to appease everybody either. If somebody sits there and that's what they think, it's like, don't go to the parks anymore. Don't go on the attractions. Don't be a Disney Plus subscriber, because you could sit there and you could literally pick apart every film that was ever filmed and go, why didn't they do this? Here's a pack of Lorcana. It's called a hobby. Apparently, we're getting a lot of people interested in this now. And you go do that instead. Focus your energy on something else.
So, as I said, things get a little bit convoluted because of all the musical numbers and you're cutting back and forth. But somewhere in here, Snow White recalls that as she was running away, the huntsman said that she doesn't know the truth about her father. And to me, I don't think that you can interpret that any other way than, the queen saw to it that he was killed. But Snow White interprets it as he might still be alive somewhere in the Southern Kingdom where he went to fight. Or he may be captured. He may still be out there somewhere. I feel like it's a little bit naive to have her believing in that. And while I do appreciate the fact that she's still a Disney princess and we still have to give her that hopefulness and that optimism, I don't feel like that jives with the story that they're trying to tell of making her a strong leader, because she should be of the mentality, you know, that should be the through line of my parents were gone. I have to follow in my father's footsteps. I have to figure out a way to take back the kingdom and lead it. But I think this was the workaround for all of this Peter Dinklage caused controversy, because now you have Jonathan and the bandits who fight in the name of the king, also doubling down on this idea that he's still alive, even though they know that he is not. And when we came to this part in the film, I paused it and I looked at you and I said, oh, this was the group that was leaked in the photo. And then I started to wonder if maybe these were never supposed to be the dwarves repurposed all along. Maybe they were always going to be CGI, and maybe the public read a lot of it too much into the quote unquote leaked photo.
I'm not so sure. If you look at some of the outfits that the bandits are wearing, you can see a grumpy. You can see a dopey. I'm not so sure that wasn't the initial intent. Honestly, what I think it was, I don't think the dwarves were supposed to have a role in this film past hi ho and whistle while you work. Because you're right, she immediately gets into her head that her father is still alive. And when she tells them that she is going to continue her trek to try and find her father, they're off to work, and they literally say goodbye to each other. And the last thing that you see as they're heading back to the mine is Dopey stops, and he turns, and he waves goodbye. It feels like it was supposed to be a final goodbye. I don't think the dwarves were supposed to be in this movie after this moment. And I think because of the backlash, they shoehorned the dwarves back in. And based on what we know of the public outcry, what we know of when the reshoots happened, and what we know of where it becomes very evidently clear where the reshoots get put into the film, which might be a where in the park, might be a where in the film, I don't know. You're going to have to wait and see. I believe, without any proof whatsoever, so I could be completely wrong, but my hypothesis is that this was the end of the dwarves. I think we were getting them to just appease the Disney fans, because how can you make this without them? But I don't think they were supposed to be a big part of this movie.
See, and I think that this was the reshoot, rewriting them in as bandits. Because what I'm going by as far as looking for the tells, Rachel Zegler's face. Because it's 2 years later, she's looking a little bit more angular and chiseled, you know, because she's growing. She's in her mid-20s now, you know?
Right.
But regardless of however it is that they pivoted, this scene sort of made me wish that maybe she and Jonathan had met as children in the village. I feel like it would have given more of a reason for Jonathan to want to fight in her father's name. And maybe it would have been a little bit less jarring that he's breaking into the castle. Maybe he worked there at one point too. Or he was raised there, or they played there where he knew a way in. And that's how he was able to break in and steal the food. But I feel like it would have been nice to have that as a connection to her roots, based on the idea of her starting to forget herself.
But then you lose the entire plot point where she's disappeared from the public eye and no one knows why they haven't heard from her. If he knows who she is, if he's been able to come and go as he pleases, if he knows a way in, if they had a history, it completely sabotages the entire point of the queen just pushing her aside and the public never hearing from her. Because she'd have an advocate in him.
I mean, I would have rather seen him trying to get to her than see her standing outside mopping, looking over the kingdom. You know, like she should have been locked away.
Oh, that I agree with.
And yeah, and then maybe he's trying to get to her. But that might also play too much into the idea of a man coming to save her if he's advocating for her.
Yeah, it's a shame that that's the exact thing that happens at the end of the movie. You know what else doesn't make any sense to me? These bandits, they come out, and they are like the ragtag group that don't really have good weapons. It's like, oh, we're going to do this again. Slingshots and sticks defeat armored guards with arrows and swords.
But you know what? It does serve to have Snow White getting them out of the jam, because clearly they're not going to be able to do this by themselves. So I like that she had to think on her feet and come up with a clever plan to use a decoy. And that's what ultimately gets them to defeat the guards, is because she creates a diversion.
And then they run away! Run away!
But again, they are handcuffed. I truly believe that this was all part of the rewrite, but you have to give her some kind of agency to have the upper hand, to show her becoming a leader. You can't have the guy rescue her.
But he literally does.
I know.
Because he takes an arrow for her. She doesn't need to be saved by the prince. She doesn't need to be saved by the prince. Weird. And then he literally takes an arrow to save her life.
Right. So, okay. Here's where that works, though. That gets her back to the cottage because she thinks that Doc is a doctor, you know, like a licensed physician that can actually help her. That was kind of funny. It was kind of funny. But I appreciate we had to get her back to the cottage for the evil queen's visit, as opposed to just leaving her in the cottage to cook and clean all day and then have her be paid a visit by the kindly old woman and fall for it. You get her back there. So in the meantime, the queen does poison the apple and transforms herself in practical makeup. Thank you.
Yes.
For all the flaws of this movie, they got the queen right. They did everything right by her. The costumes, the makeup, that was wonderful. But I like that we have more of a buy-in here instead of she's just standing in the cottage sweeping all day and talking to the animals, you know?
But I don't think, again, this is a hypothesis. I don't think we were ever supposed to see the dwarves again. I think that this was a means of getting the dwarves back into the movie.
I would agree with that, because once Doc miraculously revives Jonathan, you get a party sequence. And we will talk about Silly Song when we do the music, but this is the most obvious instance to me where the dwarves were added in, because it's such a quick beat. And even if you weren't going to do the song as you had it originally in the animation, you're still in Germany here. I wanted to see like an Oktoberfest level celebration with, I mean, I don't necessarily know that I need to see the dwarves drinking out of beer steins, but like it would have been nice to see that kind of a party atmosphere if you were going to have a musical number break here, regardless of whether it's Silly Song or not. And I think that they changed what would have been a musical number with the bandits to get Silly Song in, because the CGI dwarves were added in. What does work for me, though, is that Jonathan is going to go off to find her father. So Snow White gives him the necklace as collateral. And then he gets captured. So the queen has it when she comes back for Snow White. So it's believable that Jonathan would have sent her. That I think was smart.
Yes.
So that Snow White didn't seem to just fall for something really dumb.
Yeah, it didn't make her seem gullible. Yeah, I thought all of that worked. And then he needs to kiss her and bring her back. So I guess she gets saved by a... Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. She doesn't get saved by the prince. She gets saved by the bandit. That's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going for progressive here...
What are we doing here?
And we were trying to establish that she doesn't need a prince to save her, you still needed a man to save you.
I'm telling you, I don't think she read the script
When
before
she made
those comments. And that's not uncommon in Hollywood, because Ryan Reynolds has gone on record to say when he did Green Lantern, they didn't have a script, they had a poster, and he signed on to do it.
No, and that's how it happens sometimes, is that an actor will give a letter of intent when they know that there's a project and they're interested. That's a lot of times how scripts get greenlit, because you have the talent interested in a project, and that can make it go.
Right.
So it does happen. I think, again, going back to the theory of the CGI dwarves were never supposed to be a part of it. I think she made those comments, and then to write the dwarves in, they went with the original ending of the movie. I don't think this was ever supposed to happen. Based on what she said and how they were modernizing it, I don't think that he was ever supposed to kiss her awake. But I think because you had to have the dwarves so prevalent, this is a huge scene, right? Where they didn't create a casket for her this time. They laid her out on a rock.
Yeah.
And then waited for Jonathan. And that's where, again, I feel like maybe if they had a little bit of a past, it would have been nice that he's so invested in her. And that, I think that would have felt less like a man needing to save her if they had met as children and he's always been in love with her. So of course he's going to save her. That may have been a little bit more effective. And then, well, actually, they don't rush the ending, because now you have a full showdown with the queen. After Snow White has, quote unquote, disappeared from the eyes of the townspeople, she shows up in the kingdom, and they immediately know who she is and stand behind her, even though they haven't seen her in 10 years? I do like how the queen sort of baits her, and she's like, all right, you want to kill me? Do it. Here's a blade. And she knows that Snow White's not going to be able to bring herself to do that. How did you feel? Because I keep going back and forth about her recognizing the townspeople and saying, you were once a baker, you were once a farmer, and helping them to realize who they were before they turn on the queen.
I'm fine with that, because it harkens back to a line that she says to the dwarves earlier, which is that that her mother taught her it's very important to remember somebody's name.
Mm-hmm.
However, she forgot who she is, but she didn't. She's forgetting this, but she's not. There's just too many inconsistencies. And how did all of a sudden, this guy that was a farmer for 20 years and has been now a soldier for 5 to 10 somehow forgot that he was a farmer? Oh yeah, I did do that once.
Yeah.
It's not like when you go back and you watch a movie 15 years later that you thought you hadn't seen, and then you see some scenes, you go, oh, wait a minute, I did see this. You sort of remember what your profession was.
I think you needed a little bit more. And I mean, you don't need to necessarily drag this scene on anymore. You don't need to add screen time to this film. But instead of you were a baker, I think we needed a little bit more of you were a baker and you worked in the palace and I used to come down with my mom and help you make the most delicious pies, or something like that, where she had a tangible memory with him so that he can take a beat to consider, like, yes, I do remember that, but do I want to stand behind you and turn on the queen and deal with all of the repercussions that come with that? You just needed more of a beat.
Yeah, I also don't buy this notion that the queen is going to kill her in front of the entire kingdom.
No.
I mean, the queen, for all intents and purposes, married into the throne, whereas Snow White is the blood princess. It is literally her throne to have. I just don't buy the fact, and the fact that the queen has been so calculated and successful. She's never had a moment where she looks like she's coming off the rails. I mean, yeah, she's going to have the huntsman kill her because she's not the fairest of them all, but she's having one person do one thing in a shroud of secrecy in a remote area. She's not doing it with an audience. And I just don't buy that the queen would have done this.
I mean, I do like it more than she falls off a cliff and she's gone, because we do get that showdown, and then ultimately she's trapped in her own device because it's the mirror that takes her out. I actually liked that too. I think her being taken out was a more effective change overall.
I was fine with it, but we needed a why. Was she indebted to the mirror? Was she cursed by the mirror? Like, I just don't understand why she shattered the mirror and the mirror turns her to dust. I think we needed something else there.
Right, like where did the mirror develop this moral compass from?
Yeah.
Which actually, that would have been kind of interesting too, because why does he flip from pandering to her and telling her that she's the fairest of them all to Snow White? It's only... I think it's because in the animation, Snow White comes of age, and that's why she's able to have the title of the fairest in the land. That would have been good to get a little bit more depth. And yeah, to give the queen a backstory of how she even got the powers in the first place. Maybe she is indebted to the mirror.
Right.
Imagine that. If they had just done a villain origin story, we would have gotten a lot more answers and saved probably a lot more headaches.
Absolutely.
So once the queen is taken out, Snow White regains her rightful place. The kingdom celebrates, and we see Dopey reading the story with his newfound voice.
We didn't need it. I don't need Dopey. Halfway through the movie, I realized what was happening. I was like, oh, Dopey's going to be the narrator.
Yeah.
We didn't need it. I like I said earlier, if he would have just used his whistle at that final showdown, and that would have been what he contributed, that would have been enough.
This is where I'm also inclined to believe that the dwarves were a seed. We're never supposed to be a part of it, because you only get Dopey narrating. Everybody else is celebrating. They didn't insert really any of the other dwarves, and if they did, they're cutaways. They're not blended in with the townspeople and all of the choreography, which like I said, I appreciate they did. They used 135 extras. So they didn't skimp out on actually hiring dancers and talent to make this world look lived in.
Right. So, with all of that being said, there are a lot of things that should stand out, a lot of things to be on the lookout for, perhaps tributes to the original film, maybe, hopefully. Where in the Film is brought to you by our friends at Where in the Park, a seek-and-find card game that you can play in your favorite parks. Whether it's Disney or Universal, SeaWorld, and more, Where in the Park challenges you to spot those little details that so many can miss. To order your game packs, visit monoreelradio.com and click our affiliate link for a 10% discount today. Would you like to go first?
Sure.
Go ahead. I will give you the honor.
Mine is sort of just a self-validating thing. I know we've not talked about music yet, but one of the things that I noticed was Waiting on a Wish. to me, sounded very much like Greatest Showman. And I thought that that was another move. And it might have been where Disney is trying to follow a successful blueprint and give us something that, as a movie going public, we know, we like, and that obviously, you know, The Greatest Showman is a huge hit. Disney purchased the rights to it so they could have it on Disney Plus. So come to find out, all of the original songs that they did for this film were in fact the writer of The Greatest Showman. So I don't know if that means the work is derivative. I don't know that it was intentional as a studio direction. I'm not sure. But we do have the team behind The Greatest Showman and La La Land doing the music for this.
So, partly validating. And look, it's still partly hypothesis, but with some more research, I think what I picked up on was right. My where in the film, you started talking earlier about where Silly Song was inserted. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, she's talking to the bandits. The dwarves are there, but the bandits aren't talking to the dwarves. Jonathan's not talking to the dwarves. She's not talking to the dwarves. And then I'm starting to see where they are cutting back and forth, and it is very, very clear in some of those shots, she's clearly 2 years older than she was.
Mm-hmm.
So then, upon a little bit more research, find out that the reshoots in 2024 primarily removed a lot of story with the bandits specifically. And there was a song called Hidden in My Heart that was described, this is a quote from the New York Times, as a second act tearjerker sung by one of the dwarves. I believe that that scene was part of the reshoot. I believe that the dwarves were added in. And now that we know that there were just a lot of things that were changed in the second act, and I thought to myself, something about this doesn't look or feel right. And I believe, again, it's a hypothesis. All right, so don't sue me. But I believe that if I'm to narrow down exactly where that change came from and where those reshoots were, I think that was it. You had said it before, and I think that this sort of, it doesn't send it home, but it confirms our belief.
Because you know what it is? The bandits and the dwarves, they feel very Superman and Clark Kent.
Yeah.
You really don't see them interacting in the same shots.
Right. But they're in the same... But the difference between Clark Kent and Superman are never in the same room together. In this instance, they all are.
But that's why it's odd, because the dwarves were added. You don't have all of the sight lines. You don't have them interacting.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about our cast. So here's the deal. I try real hard to watch this without having a well-documented, I'm not going to pretend that it's not out there. I try to watch this without a well-documented opinion of Rachel Ziegler and how she is a PR nightmare. And when I take all that away, I think she did fine in the role. Her musical numbers are phenomenal. We're going to talk about the music in a few minutes here. She's the reason why this movie failed. I'm putting it out there. The reason why this was a box office bomb was because of her. Because it was the doubling down and the doubling down and the doubling down. And I think it's a shame, because I think that aside from the really horrific CGI, which it's Disney, and now it's become passable that Disney CGI is bad. We've been talking about this for years. When you see it, you go, huh, but it's Disney. But then you watch things from the 1980s or the 1960s or the 1930s.
Or Wicked.
Or something new like Wicked. And you sit there and go, God, this looks so good. You know what? Disney doesn't get a pass for having bad CGI anymore, and they shouldn't. But until such time that people start talking with their wallets, I'd like to think that that sort of happened here. They're just going to keep doing it on the cheap as they can. And it's funny because when you look at something like the new Superman movie that just came out, headed by a man that Disney lost in James Gunn, the salaries for those actors are minuscule for a film of that scope and caliber. I mean, the leading man who plays Superman made $750,000. That's his salary. Now think about the amount of money that Disney throws at their talent, but they throw so much money at that talent that they've got to save the money elsewhere.
Right.
They save it on the CGI. Whereas you look at Superman, and they saved a lot of money on talent because the talent wanted to be a part of a big franchise with a great script, and they invested that same money into making the movie look good. And I think the same can be said about Wicked, but let's get back to Rachel Ziegler. I think that if you would have looked past all of that CGI, you would have gone in knowing it's going to be a CGI mess. If she would have just said, you know what? We're taking the elements you love about Snow White, and we're adding some modern takes to it, and we're making her a more well-rounded character, and we're staying true to what you love, this movie would have made $1 billion at the box office because it's Snow White. It's impossible for me to not put a lot of this blame on her, which is a shame because, frankly, I think that while they have some problems, I think they accomplished their goal of taking Snow White as a character and making her a bigger character than she was in 1937. I believe they accomplished that.
I would agree with that. But to your point, that was all that she had to say, is that, you know, Snow White was made in 1937. We're less than 2 decades away from having just got the right to vote. There was a very dated view of women. That was their role, was being in the home. So it very much reflected the time period, coupled with that film was written by men. Now we're modernizing it. We're doing a more contemporary take on the character, and our screenplay was written by a woman. And then she could have given the screenwriter her flowers, and that was all you had to say, and we could have left it at that. But I am going to try and take the high road here. It is very hard to block out all of the noise, but she is so good, especially with the musical numbers. I was actually able to do that. I think that she was even better in this than she was in West Side Story. I think there were times where she played Snow White a little angry, and there is a way to do a modern, fast-talking, empowered female without having to make her sarcastic and bitter, and I think we fell into that trap a little bit. But otherwise, overall, I think she did really good, and I wish that she had just kept her mouth shut so that everyone was more open-minded about experiencing it. But to your point, I don't blame her solely for the film failure. Maybe at the box office, I'm looking at failure in a different way, and that's where I think Peter Dinklage should take the blame, because he caused story issues, and that's what I'm looking at more as the failure.
I think that that's fair. I certainly, I mean, I'm not going to repeat myself. Yes, he owns a part of that. But I think if Disney would have just said, well, we offered him a role, he didn't want it, we're going to make a story that we want to make, people would have gone and seen it. The whole Peter Dinklage thing would have gone away, but it's Disney, and they're not ever really going to do that, right? They're just going to be reactionary. And I think that well, I'm repeating myself. I'm done. I'm moving on. Gal Gadot. Let's talk about Gal Gadot. I think she was spectacular in this. I think she looked the part. I love how she played it. I liked seeing her as a villain because we've always seen her as a baddie, you know, in regards to Wonder Woman. And amazing. Everybody loved her in Wonder Woman. They loved her as Wonder Woman. And then magically people turned against her in this movie. Don't ask me why.
Well, Wonder Woman, the second one, was not good.
Yeah, but that's not her fault. That movie.
It was a little her fault in that one.
But everybody turned against her here. I was really impressed with her musical numbers. And it's not that, you know, I never, who knew, right? We're going to talk about them in a minute here. Like, who knew that she had it in her? You know, she was a pleasant surprise. But I thought all around, the attitude, the demeanor, she pulled it off. I loved her as a villain. I thought she was great. It's a shame that she's not going to get more work with Disney because let's be real. Other than maybe like Marty Kleba, none of these people are ever going to work for Disney again. And that's sort of a shame. And I'll even say that in regards to Rachel Zegler. Because I think that there is enough talent there. None of them are going to work with them again.
Which is also a shame for Gal Gadot because she's been in Wreck-It Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet, you know, so she's done work with them before. Yeah, I thought she was really good. I loved seeing her as a villain. I give her a lot of credit because, you know, she was saying that this was her dream role and she actually got nervous the first day on set because it kind of hit her like what an iconic role it is. And I think that in the face of all the controversy, she kept her head held high. And, you know, she still, while they didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of press for this film, you know, I think that she handled it with grace because Rachel Zegler sort of took her down with all of the unnecessary commentary that she was making. But yeah, no, I was really surprised by the musical numbers. I wish that she was able to dance a little bit more because I think that the singing was really good. But for as good as she was, I'm not going to say that she was perfect casting because during one of the songs, there was one person that came to mind and I was like, oh gosh, I would really like to see what she could have done with this role. I kept thinking back to Catherine Zeta-Jones in Chicago. I think she would have slayed this part. And we know she can sing, obviously, and dance because she, like I said, she killed it in Chicago. So I think that would have been like an interesting take on this, but the role was written with Gal Gadot in mind. I don't think that they even saw anybody. And maybe that's because Catherine Zeta-Jones is tied up in Wednesday at the moment. But, you know, this part was made for her, and I do think that she did a good job, and she certainly doesn't deserve all of the hate that she's getting right now.
Totally agree. Andrew Burnap plays Jonathan. This is a very German-sounding name. Yeah, this character, I like the idea of this character more than I like the actual character. And that's nothing, it's not a knock against him. There's just something about this character that seems like a shell. He doesn't seem like a character. He seems like an idea.
He's very one note. Very one note. And to me, the actor didn't do anything to elevate it. This could have been anybody. Literally anybody.
I guess, do we just talk about, I guess we talk about the dwarves just as a whole. I mean, I'll name everybody that played them, but because they are such afterthoughts, except for Dopey and Doc to a lesser extent, that you kind of just lump them in together. Jeremy Swift plays Doc. Martin Kleba plays Grumpy. George Salazar is Happy. Titus Burgess plays Bashful. Apologies to you, sir. Andrew Grodelution plays Sleepy. Jason Kravitz is Sneezy. Andrew Barth Feldman plays Dopey. Every problem I have with these dwarves are not a product of the performance of the actors. it's a product of my very well documented, just in this conversation, and I'm going to repeat myself, which I hate to do, and I don't care at this point, decision to cast this the way that they did. Martin Kleba should not be a CGI motion caption voice actor. He should have had practical makeup on. He should have been on set. It should have been him that we saw.
He should look like himself and not like Tommy Lee Jones. I am so tired of Disney doing this man dirty. Get him his Loungefly and get him better parts.
Okay, we have to tell the Loungefly story now.
I think we did on that episode.
We have to tell the story again, though, because unless somebody's going to go listen to a dockside from over a year ago.
Well, we were at the House of Mouse Expo a couple years ago now, like 2 years ago. It was 2023. Yeah,
it was.
It wasn't last year. It was 2023.
That's
already.
right. That's right.
So I had my Pirates Loungefly on, and it's the black. It's me. It's the black one with the gold trim that you had gifted to me because I loved it so much, and it has the ears on the top. So he saw it and he asked where I got it, because he thought I had purchased it. You know, there's so many vendors at these expos, which is great. So he thought I had bought it from Loungefly because they did have a setup there. And I was like, oh, no, I got this a couple of years ago. And he said that he wanted one and broke my heart, because I was like, he's not only just a part of Pirates of the Caribbean, but and this is a perfect example of how they squandered him in this film, because his role in Pirates grew throughout those films, and it got bigger and bigger because people just loved his character so much. And I was like, you were not like given a Loungefly when they did this release? Are you kidding me? So someone get the man his Loungefly.
I think he eventually did get it. Because I think we found one for him, and we were like, Martin, we found it. He's like, oh, I'm on it. I got it. I think he did eventually get it.
They didn't have it there. We found it online.
But in the interim, I think one of the vendors had one. They just hadn't brought it. I know it sounded like we were heading towards a resolution. So at least something got solved for poor Martin Kleba. Yeah, he's a beloved member of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. He should have been front and center. It should have been him that we saw, not a CGI nightmare motion capture of him, and that's my biggest problem. And you know what? All of their performances, they're fine, but they all seem like shells because they all feel very forced. And I don't blame them. I blame all of the aforementioned reasons. And I think that the whole thing is just a shame. Because the Seven Dwarves are 7 of the most beloved characters in the history of the company. And the fact that they were done dirty for so many reasons, it's just infuriating. And I don't care how many times I watch this movie. In time, I may watch this with a more rosy perspective, and I still haven't given my final review, of course. I may have had a better perspective on it in a few years, and perhaps things will change, and perhaps things will come to light, and people will take a softened stance, and perhaps I'll be in that community too. But the one thing that's never going to feel right about this are these CGI dwarves.
I definitely agree with you that the CGI is terrible, and they did the actors dirty. Taking that out of it, though, I don't know how they managed to do this, but there is just something about the dwarves that is just so charming. And I think that does come from the way that they're written and just their presence. I think that's it. It's the presence of them. Because even though they look terrible, and the reasoning behind not having them as real actors is even more terrible, almost everything that I liked about this movie and anything that I found heartwarming was because of the dwarfs. There were moments where I did feel my heart swell a little bit. And it was because of the dwarves. I don't know. I mean, maybe we just call it Disney magic. But there was something tugging at my heart despite how rough they looked.
But that's because they are a beloved part of the company. They're a beloved part of the history. Everybody loves the Seven Dwarves, and that's why there never should have been a question as to whether they were in it or not.
Right, but it was more than just nostalgia doing it for me, though. There was something in there, in this film, about these dwarfs that I was actually gravitating towards.
Let's move on and talk about the music here and the songs and the soundtrack. Starting with Good Things Grow, which is as the movie starts. And you had sort of wondered whether we needed to start on a musical number. I didn't mind it. I actually like this song a lot. I think it's a bit of an earworm. You're right. It sounds like Greatest Showman. So, of course, let's write music that sounds like something that was popular 7 years ago. Very Disney of them. But that show is at least proven to be, I don't know if it's timeless yet, because I think people are sort of like getting over it. But it does sound great. What I love most about this is that the set with those bright, very bright pastels and bright colors, it looks like Fantasyland at the Magic Kingdom. It looks like you took what we know and love about Fantasyland and you brought it to life.
I didn't even realize that. I hadn't
It's
even
my
considered
favorite part of the whole thing.
I was just appreciative, like, okay, this reads Germany, you know? But you're right. It really does give us that familiar Fantasyland setting. And that's, like I said, I do like the song for setting and establishing the townsfolk. And, you know, I said it earlier, it does establish Germany. But this is going to sound very nitpicky. We're sharing pies with the townspeople. Nothing says Americana more than an apple pie. Why not apple streusel? That was a bit of a miss for me. Again, very, very nitpicky. And not my biggest issue with this number. Like I said, I don't know if we necessarily needed it. You did for setting and story. But I do feel like as far as character development, it would have been nice to see Snow White breathe a little bit more. But for an opening establishing number, it's great. And to your point, I agree. This is another one that sounds like Greatest Showman because, well, we know why.
Waiting on a Wish is the next song. And while Rachel Zegler does a really good job with it, the problem I have is that she's too self-aware of what's going on to sing this song with these sorts of lyrics. And it seems like she's in control of everything, but in control of nothing at the same time. I don't blame the lyricist and I don't blame the songwriters. I blame the screenwriting that gets us to this point. It's the same thing that I've gone back to so many times with it being problematic that she apparently doesn't know who she is, but she does. If they would have eliminated this song would have stuck out as a banger. But because you talk out of both sides of your mouth in a matter of moments, unfortunately, it does the song dirty.
I actually disagree. I absolutely love this number, even though this was the first one that sort of clued me into Greatest Showman. I think this is an upgraded I Want song. I think she sings it beautifully. I actually listened to it because I had seen a piece of it either in the trailer or for some kind of promo. And I went and I listened to it on Spotify before I watched the movie. And I listened to it a couple of times. That's how much I liked it. The only thing that I bump on is all she does is sweep and mop in this number. And to me, that's the regression. I mean, yes, we said it before. The queen made her wear rags and clean. It is part of the story. But to see that that's all she's doing and to not give her something else to do, I feel like that goes against everything that you are trying to establish for this character. And being that it is her I Want song, you should have her just doing something else. I wouldn't have cared, honestly, if the entire thing took place at that wishing well and in the garden. if it meant not having to see her cleaning.
I feel like the reason why they leaned so much into that was so that they could just get that shot of her like resting her head on top of the broom handle and like staring off and getting that like doe-eyed wishy look. I honestly think that's the only reason why they made her mop and sweep so many times.
Yeah.
Oh God, help me. Hi-ho.
Oh God.
It's so unnecessary with the added lyrics that are so heavy-handed and insult our intelligence. Look at this. I'm happy. We know. It's so bad. It's so bad. Why it is one of the most timeless songs in cinema history. You didn't need to add these really like doofy lyrics. It's so distracting.
Yeah, because they cut them from Dig Dig Dig. That's where all of the personalities get established. And what I was really upset about was that you still included it, but you slam it in the middle of Hi Ho. I wish they let it breathe a little, because there's a line in that song where Happy says, "It ain't no trick to get rich quick." And I'm like, that's
so
an
good.
interesting story point. The queen is taking everything. She's clearly having the dwarves mine the diamonds for her because who else is doing it? But wouldn't it be interesting if they were taking their own secret stash and you gave the dwarves more agency? Anyway, yeah, I go so back and forth because you hear that initial hi ho when Doc calls out, and immediately that's where I was charmed. That was a little bit because of the nostalgia, and then you see the shadows come over on the side of the mountain, and like that's where you almost start to fall in love, and then the reveal of the dwarves makes you step back a little bit. And then, like I said, they squander the whole thing with this CGI set. I appreciate that they kept it, but I think I actually would have rather they kept Silly Song and cut more of this than have this dragged out, insulting version of this song where, to your point, the lyrics are just so awful because they're trying to establish all of the characters.
All Is Fair, sung by Gal Gadot. Like I said before, who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew? She was really good. I like this as a villain song. I don't know how I feel about like all of her palace servants like joining her in this big musical number, because you didn't write this for Broadway. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a stage performance. I wish that you would have just had her doing it on her own and not getting everybody involved, because then it takes on a level of cheesy where you're almost kind of laughing at it.
Well, also, who are all these people if she's having Snow White clean?
I don't know.
That being said, it's a great ad. It is something that I called out in the animation that I was like, wow, you start the movie on the evil queen, but you don't give her a villain song. So I do appreciate that they gave her one. To your point, though, I think this song would have been a standout number if it was in Descendants. But here, it's not that Broadway caliber. You do get a little bit of the auto-tune. I mean, she can sing. I'm not going to take that away from her. She can definitely sing, but you can hear the auto-tune. But I feel like it could have been elevated a little bit more as a much bigger number. And I think, to your point, had she done it alone without all of the other theatrics, I think it would have been more effective. But like I said, if they had Kathy Najimy do this in Descendants, it would have knocked my socks off.
Whistle While You Work. For me, I think that this is where Rachel Zegler's probably the most charming. I really
Agreed.
like her in this. It's such a CGI mess. That's the biggest problem. And it's not the song. It's the, if you would have had 8 talented people on that stage, so Rachel Zegler plus, the 7 dwarves doing real live choreography, this would have been a knockout.
And it would have been so much fun because they could have done things like the gimmicky sight gags, like the Pirates of the Caribbean sword fighting where, you know, they're teetering on the tables and things like that because they flipped the table at one point. Like you could have used that as a set piece that they're all sliding up and down. Like this could have been so much fun. And to your point, there are very charming elements to it. Getting into the song, the setup all works with the changes that they made. She's great with the dancing. She is, to your point, very charming, but this would have been such an incredible standout had they used the real actors.
Yeah. And it's honestly, it's the one time where she seems like she's having a lot of fun.
Yes.
Princess problems.
I love this ad. I think this is great. I think that it gives the romance a chance to develop because they're sort of bantering back and forth in the duet. And I like that, you know, I like the social commentary of Jonathan calling the princess out, even though Snow White does have a rough go of it. There still is an element of you're out of touch with reality because you're still in the palace. You know, and I think that is a very modern take when you factor in what's going on between, you know, the average Joe and the billionaires of the world today.
Yeah, I mean, in her defense, she was turned into a servant and locked away. So I understand what they were trying to do, but it does lose a little bit of power because she has been treated so terribly up to this point. A hand meets a hand. This is a duet that is so good that you should almost put it on a pedestal in regards to really great Disney ballads. But again, because of the PR nightmare that was weird, we don't need the prince, we don't need the... Then why is this song in here? All of the things you said you weren't going to do, all of the things you didn't need to rely upon, that all gets flushed away in moments like this. And I think that is such a problem because it is otherwise a very, very good song and it is a very good performance by both of them.
I have no notes on it and it was completely forgettable for me because I'm so focused on you gave us this tiny little sliver of silly song. No lyrics, just the melody. And the dwarves, you know, playing some instruments. I thought I was angry when they gave us one verse of Be Prepared in The Lion King. This made me livid because it is hands down the most charming scene in the animation. They thought enough of it to, even though the dark ride of Snow White is gone, put it at the end of the mine train. It is one of the most iconic scenes in the Disney canon, having Dopey standing on Sneezy's shoulders and dancing with Snow White. And I think this comes from they did not want to insult the community of the little people. I don't know that even if they had used real actors that they would have done this because maybe it would have been in poor taste. But being that you didn't and you bothered to animate them, why not give us that moment? This is the equivalent of missing the chandelier shot in Beauty and the Beast.
I was going to make that exact point. And if the mentality is, well, you could do it in the 1937 version because they've been drawn in a way where they're not supposed to look real, it's like, well, neither were these. It's the same thing, just with a computer instead of hand-drawn. Yeah, it's a tremendous miss. There's no doubt about it, and I think it gives levity to the idea that this entire thing was an afterthought and that they were never supposed to be there to begin with.
No, and that's the thing. I would have rather had that big party number than the duet here.
Yeah. Final thoughts. I'm going to go first because I'm going to make this concise. You know all the problems I have with it. You know all the problems I've had with it leading up to this point. In retrospect, am I glad that we spoke with our wallets for a change and didn't go see this in the theaters? Absolutely, because I believe that was what was right for us. Apparently, it's what was right for a lot of people. And I think that it's actually done some good because now Disney is listening to a lot of things. And some of that is going to be reflected in some of the news that we discuss in a few minutes here. Disney is listening, and I think sometimes it's important to speak with your wallet. Am I glad that we did support the film on the streaming service that we're already paying for and give people who did put a lot of hard work into the film the opportunity to have their artwork seen? Yes. Is it Pinocchio bad? Hell no. This is not where I believed that we were going to rank this at the bottom of Disney live action remakes as the absolute last slot. It is not that. Is it towards the bottom? It's towards the bottom, but it's not at the bottom. It's not Pinocchio. It's not the second Maleficent film, but it's also not Lady and the Tramp. It's not Cinderella. It's not the first Maleficent film, and it should be. And there are so many reasons why it should be, and it's not. Part of that is the controversy. Part of that is bad PR. Part of that is horrific CGI, and a lot of it and most of it, I believe, comes from just a really spotty script that is just ridden with holes. Maybe that's because this film got chopped apart and reshot and changed around. I don't know. But it's not Pinocchio bad. It's fine. I probably wouldn't watch it again. But I was relieved at the end of it to at least see some things that were redeeming.
I agree, especially about it not being Pinocchio bad. Here you at least see where effort was put forth. And to your point, especially too, by all of the people who worked on it. I mean, you've got the music and choreographers from La La Land on this. You've got a lot of talented background extras. For the practical set builds, you know, you've got some really talented craftsmen, and it's a shame that they all had to go down with this ship, right? My final thoughts, this is not something that I was expecting to say, but when you factor in all of the story issues that were direct results of them having to pivot for, to your point, the controversy and the PR nightmares, I kind of wish that Disney had just stuck to their guns and dug their heels in and made the movie that they were going to make. I hear what you're saying about people speaking with their wallets, but I think that this is also just as much the public's fault as anything else, because we've become so reactionary, and you and I are guilty of it too. People were so reactionary with that first quote unquote leaked photo, and then they doubled down on it with the trailer. I think as a society, we're starting to forget that trailers are supposed to hype a movie. They are promotional material. They're supposed to make a movie look good. So yeah, there are instances when there are bad trailers that are not going to entice you to go see a film. But I think the bigger problem is the armchair warriors who have so many opinions before you can even see what a product really looks like. And I think that's what Snow White falls victim to more than anything else. So many people felt predisposed to hate on this just simply because it is Walt Disney's first film, and the track record with these live action remakes and sequels in the past few years has not been that great. And I feel like so many people were defending a film that admittedly did need some updates. Certainly you and I said that we critiqued it very hard, and we felt that there were things that didn't fly then, certainly could be updated now. But I feel like people were so defensive on behalf of Walt Disney and not actually recognizing the film. If you've even watched the film recently, you know, there was just a lot of outcry and a lot of noise for something that I feel like people don't even necessarily know what they're really talking about. So I think there is a lesson to be learned for everyone here. And part of me wishes in this case that Disney would have said, you know what, this is our property and we're going to do what we're going to do with it. And even, look at something like Cinderella. You took all of the music out of that. We didn't even have Bippity Boppity Boo, and no one batted an eyelash because they made a great film. So all this to say, this had the chance to be a really great remake, and we're never going to know that. And I feel like what we got instead is probably not as good as what it could have been. But I will say it was better than I expected. I think it was better than anybody expected.
Yeah.
And there are things worth watching for. And that's not something that I was expecting to say coming out of this.
We want to know what you have to say about the live-action remake of Snow White. You can let us know on all forms of social media at Monoreel Radio, or you can send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. News of the week is coming up, but first a quick break.
News of the Week is proudly sponsored by KMV Travel. KMV Travel is a boutique travel agency that helps families plan personalized vacations and create unforgettable memories on land and at sea. If you've dreamed of setting sail on the Disney fleet, KMV Travel will help you from booking to bon voyage. When you connect with a KMV travel specialist, they will not only assist you with your cruise package, but they will also help you with your stateroom selection, pre- and post-cruise accommodations, ground transportation, onboard activity reservations, and port activity reservations. Whether you are traveling as a couple, with a family, or a large group, your KMV travel advisor will help you customize the perfect cruise itinerary for you. Visit KMV Travel to set sail now.
Hey guys, my name is Mike. I listen to Jackie and Sean's podcast every week on my commute into work. So I reached out to Jackie, and she helped me put together the perfect getaway. I did a 4-night Disney cruise ship, and she was able to answer every question that I threw at her. She put together the perfect dates and an insurance plan that made the whole experience stress-free. She was able to help me with little tips and tricks, like you can get a Mickey Mouse bar delivered to you any time of the day. And I think that was a mistake because now I put about 10, 15 pounds on. I'll definitely be using Jackie again in the future. Thanks for everything.
Talking about properties where the quality has been at best subpar recently, let's talk about the MCU and some recent comments that were made by Kevin Feige.
Yeah, it was either last year or early this year, Bob Iger had acknowledged that the problem with Marvel has become quantity over quality. But Kevin Feige, because we've got San Diego Comic-Con coming up, or happening now, really, he doubled down on that because he really identified the problem, and he crunched the numbers from 2007 to 2019. So we're talking Iron Man to Endgame. Marvel put out 50 hours of film and television. I don't want to call it content because that was right around when the streamer came out and we went on this slippery slope of starting to refer to things as content. So then from 2019 on, 127 hours. You doubled your output in a little bit more than half the time. And it shows. It absolutely shows.
Yeah, certainly this latest phase of the MCU hasn't been a complete bust. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was a lot of fun. Thunderbolts was a lot of fun. X-Men 97, still haven't watched it yet. Been wanting to. Everybody's talked about how great it is. But by and large, everything else that's come along with it has just felt flat.
We're on the upswing, though, with Marvel.
We hope.
I think now that they've really identified the problem, I think 2025 is going to be a huge turnaround year, and I have faith that they're going to get it back to what it was.
Let's talk about 2026. Not related to Marvel, but related to Disney parks. This is very exciting news that dropped seemingly out of nowhere. And when you have a Destination D23 event coming up specifically in Orlando, I'm surprised that they didn't hold this announcement because it's coming up in a couple of weeks. We have been talking for a long time about how the Star Wars, Galactic Launch Bay, right? The Galactic Outpost is over at Springs. The Launch Bay just seems so random and out of touch because you've got Galaxy's Edge on one side of the park, you've got Star Tours on another side of the park, and then you've just got this store.
The meet and greet. It's too much.
It's too much, and it's disjointed. And we've been hoping that they were going to do something about that. And admittedly, there was some hope that maybe that would be perhaps a location for Muppets Courtyard to make a resurgence. Although I think it would need to be closer to Rock and Roller Coaster. So that dream is not totally dead yet. However, starting in 2026, and we don't have a date on it yet because Disney, it is closing. And it is getting a total renovation and revamp. And we are getting what is called an animation-inspired area at Disney's Hollywood Studios.
I cried.
Legitimate.
I actually cried. And I'm trying not to get emotional now, honestly.
Because I don't think you had seen the news. I told you about it.
No, I was on the Peloton and then I came outside and you told me. So I had no idea what was going on that day. My prayers were answered. Disney, if you are listening, thank you so much. I just absolutely love the return to form. Could this be taking a page out of Universal's book? Maybe, because we are celebrating all of our old movies there and the things that we grew up on, and we absolutely love it. So maybe they were inspired by that to bring us back to what got us here in the first place. It's not only going to be a tribute and I don't want to say an exact replica of the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank, but they are going to emulate the animation building as well as the courtyard out front. So we're getting some shade, we're getting some trees, which is really nice.
It's necessary.
But we're getting the Pluto on the edge of that, where all of the landscaping is going to be in the middle. That's going to replicate Pluto Corner at the studios, which is a really nice tribute. Inside, I don't know that it's quite going to be Animation Academy again, but there are going to be some interactive animation things for families. There's also going to be a Mary Blair tribute in there that's going to have like some Alice in Wonderland inspired artwork. The thing that nobody's talking about though, because they did release a piece of concept art, I do believe we are going to lose the archway.
That has been confirmed.
Because what it is more landscaping, but it says Walt Disney Studios. You remember when we went to Burbank and we were there so early, the guard wasn't even there, and you said, "I'll give you $100 if you tell the guard, tell the guard to open up the gate." And I was just so nervous and just overwhelmed that I couldn't do it. But there was that sign we were parked outside of that said Walt Disney Studios. That's what's going in its place. I don't want to see the archway go because that's MGM and that's just another stab at the original park, but this is so much a tribute to the original park. I am beyond words excited.
Yeah. So what they've basically said is that the idea is that it is going to be an interactive experience. It's inspired by Once Upon a Studio, and it's sort of what happens when the animators leave for the day and what happens inside the building. But they did confirm, without using the phrase Animation Academy, they did confirm that there is going to be an experience where you are going to learn how to hand draw your favorite characters. So in the truth of the matter is, it's Animation Academy. We just don't know exactly how it's coming back, in what form it's coming back, but it does seem like the root of this experience is going to be the Animation Academy.
I don't care. It's coming back.
We are so excited, and it's it goes back to what we said before. Sometimes you have to talk with your wallet and you need to be heard, because inevitably they're going to have to react and you can make a difference. in making sure that things are either preserved or brought back as a fan, and I think that that's very important. Thank you so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.